the concern for a family is, hey, I may have to be the caregiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do everything. And sometimes you're gonna have to bring in somebody from the outside. With AARP saying that, well, I think it's almost 75% of people say they want to age at home now. So it's gonna be,
90%.
is it?
90% of people say they want to age at home. 75% of those people, Bradley, don't know how they're going to accomplish it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Then this is an even more important question then. So when in your experience training caregivers,
Hmm.
one, what should people look for in bringing in someone from the outside, whether that's for a few hours or as a full-time caregiver for your loved one? And then the other is going to be, what do you need to know? What are probably the top 3 or 4 things that look, you've got a few minutes to train somebody, or say, hey, you need to bone up on these 3 or 4 areas as a caregiver for your own personal family. What would those be?
Oof, that's a really good question. Partly because I've been so deeply involved in that. I'll try to pare it down. So partly it depends on what level of care you're going to be providing to someone. Does someone need supervision? Do they just need kind of outside support, or do they need hands-on care? Right. So I'm going to focus in more on this sort of heavier level of care where someone might be hands-on care. The things that I really focus on if I'm doing caregiver training is I try to teach, I want people to think, the caregiver themselves, I want them to think not just about how they're going to physically protect and care for the person, their care partner, but also how are they going to physically care for themselves. So that's something that I teach, just even in terms of thinking about if we have to do transfers, if we have to lift someone, we want to do that in the way that is going to be the safest and the easiest for both care partners. So it's teaching that safety. And along with that goes all of the techniques to go along. The other big thing that goes along with that is talking about equipment and making sure that people have the right equipment that they need in order to actually accomplish those care tasks. So, in therapy gyms and in the therapy world, we have access to all kinds of different tricks and equipment and things like that that we can use to have a smaller person care for a larger person. These are things that we also need to be educating family caregivers about too, and making sure that we find ways for them to have access to the appropriate equipment. And really, in order to know what that is, people should be working with their occupational or physical therapist in order to get those specific recommendations. And then the third thing is really about how do we set up the support that's going to be necessary for this to be sustainable long term? Again, that could mean um, how can we talk with family about getting everyone on shifts to come in if family is available, or friends or neighbors might be available. If that's not available, what kind of resources in the community are out there in terms of respite programs, in terms of paid private care that might be able to come in to help provide these kinds of help and assistance and resources? And are we getting sorry, I'm going to add another one on here. Is the home set up to support this person? And home modification is sort of one of my it's one of my favorite things to talk about because it is so powerful. So is this person's home as accessible as possible? Is it going to set them up to be as independent as they can be? Or is it going to set them up to be so that they need more physical or supervision assistance? And there are so many wonderful tools out there. And if you do think that you need a home modification, working with an occupational therapist is demonstrated by research to be the best way in order to achieve the best outcome. So definitely keep that in mind. In terms of what questions to ask, sorry, I could go off on this one for a long time. So
No,
you just jump in.
Hey, no, that's why we're talking. So I guess the other question is, so if you are considering or need to bring in someone from the outside as a home-based care provider,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's full-time, part-time for a little bit, what are some of the, because that's a big one. As a family
Huge.
member, look, you want to make sure there's so many, you hear horror stories. You hear
Yeah.
horrible stories out there. And look, it's a rough job, but the pay is not great. It's a difficult job. And trust, dependability, competence, those are what you want for your family members. So what questions do you need to ask, or what do you need to look for to really find someone who's good in a home care provider?
Yeah. And what I would add to that is that in most states, there's little to no training requirements for the caregivers that are coming into the home because they're non-medical. These are not individually licensed people,
Hmm.
by and large in most states. And so this could essentially be anyone who has no experience. So I think that there are some important questions to ask. These are not questions that you should just accept sort of write off answers to. Ask what type of training program um, these caregivers are going through. How does the agency continue to support safety and professional growth? I think that's a very, very big question because at the end of the day, this caregiver is going to be in your home. There's not additional supervision there, right? Other staff members that they can go and help for things. Can often feel like they're on their own in the
Hmm.
community in people's homes. And so I would want to know how do you train people initially when they come in, and how do you provide continuing ongoing professional development? I would want to know, how do you support families and caregivers when issues and problems arise, because inevitably stuff is going to happen. That's just
Hmm.
life, right? And I would want to know, and I would want to personally, I would want to talk with the caregiver themselves, or like have a trial session with an individual
Hmm.
caregiver while I was
Hmm.
there, in order to make sure that there was some goodness of fit too. Because often, like, these physical skills, like safe transfers and safe handling and using equipment, these are things that we can teach, right? This is just knowledge. These are things that we teach. That I've spent years and years teaching people. What we also want to see, though, is, does this person have a heart for the job that they're doing? Are they going to interact with the person that they're caring for, with mom or dad or your brother or whoever it is?
Hmm.
Or are they going to sit there and be on their phone?
Hmm.
Um, do they have good communication skills with you, with the agency, and with the person that they're caring for? Are they
Hmm.
patient? How easily do they get frustrated? And these are some things that you can really only see on observation in meeting someone, right? Because you interview someone and everyone says, "I'm really patient. I never get frustrated. I'll
Right.
interact, and I've been doing this for 20 years." And you're like, "That's great." And then, what you see in the real world can make a difference. So I would say, you know, seeing if you decide to hire an agency, doing it, if you can, on, like, I would just want to try this caregiver out. Can we see how this goes? I think that those are all really important things to consider.
Excellent. Yeah, because that is one of those things. You don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
And you're right. So you're going on the face value of, yeah, I've been doing it forever. Here's, the alphabet soup of qualifications, but what does that really mean? And I know that with personally, Shannon's late mother, we went through that with various caregivers
Hmm.
that come in, and it's a revolving door until
Hmm.
you get it right. So
People will say that they can do things all day long until you see it. It doesn't really matter, right? So again, really asking, what are your training requirements? What training does your company specifically do? If someone needs more training, how obviously I'm really hitting on this training things because it's sort of a,
sure.
a pet of mine.
Right.
But the fact is that no one knows everything. It's impossible to know everything. Doctors, nurses, therapists, we are all constantly required to get more training in what we do, right? And so that should be a normal expectation of anyone who is professionally involved in any kind of care team, even if it's non-medical.
That's critical and super important for the heavy things that we
Hmm.
talked about, for the things that actually require medical attention. There are others that are probably not as heavy, still important, but not as heavy.
Oh no, what I was all talking about was for things that we consider not needing medical attention. For
Really?
non-medical caregivers, I think these things are incredibly important. And again,
Okay.
especially because in most states, these non-medical caregivers are not required to have any kind of training, certification, anything like that.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in just a second, but I want to take 1 minute to thank our sponsor, Luma, and tell you about something you need to know about. Look, I'm old school. Sometimes I like to just pick up the phone and get an answer or ask a question. I don't want to have to deal with the chat bot, deal with AI, enter my email and wait to download something. I just want to pick up the damn phone. And look, Maybe I'm getting old, but a lot of people are that way. It's frustrating when you're trying to buy something or get information. It's even more frustrating when you're trying to get information, direction, guidance, or a resource for your aging mom or dad that you're a caregiver for. Getting caregiving information is tough because there's so much information out there. And when you need an answer, you need it, and you need it now. You need to know where to turn. And that is where Luma comes in. Luma is a phone-based support system. Old school. You can just pick up the phone, dial a number, ask your question, get an answer, get research information, whether it is about a local resource, a care provider, or a Medicare question. It's up to you. Luma is there. It's totally free and it's old school, just picking up the phone. No apps, no bots, no overwhelm, just answers, empathy, and help. To learn more, just call the number right here or visit meetluma.us. Real support for the real stuff you're dealing with. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
So
Interesting.
mhm,
So where I was going to go with that is, we've had Neil Shaw, CEO Care Yaya, on
mhm.
before, and I personally love what he and his group are doing. It's interesting of taking essentially med students or students who are in the medical pipeline there from universities to go and spend time with folks. They're very loose or light caregiving, I guess, is more of what you call it, because we talked a lot about that epidemic of loneliness and how that affects cognitive decline and everything else. And I know I think Papa, Honor, some others do work like that. That's what I was wanting to find out too. Is you're saying that you really can't separate the two?
First of all, I love this question. I think that we have this natural inclination to put dividers and walls between things. Like, we as human beings, we love to categorize things. And that's fine. But we do have to recognize how connected these things are. So let's say you have someone who has mild to moderate dementia. They're still living at home. They don't need any physical assistance for anything. They just need supervision. They need someone there during the day to make sure that they take a shower, that they don't turn on the stove, that they don't do these things, right? We might consider that like a light level of care. However, to your point, we know that things like social interaction is really, really important for both our emotional and our cognitive status. Did you know that social interaction is also linked to fall risk? Yes. So, like, more social interaction also decreases our risk of debility in things like our activities of daily living. It decreases our risk of falls. And when you have a great caregiver, be that a family caregiver or a professional caregiver who is really tuned in with this person, who, again, say maybe has mild to moderate dementia, they're well educated, they know what they're looking at. How many problems do you think they can catch and advocate for before it becomes something major? If anyone out there who has ever cared for anyone and that person has gotten a UTI, you know what I'm talking about. Things just go insane all of a sudden. You're like, what's going on? If you know that when this person's cognitive status suddenly changes, not the dementia, but something else is happening, then you also know that you can go advocate for that person to get treatment. And maybe they have a UTI, maybe they're having a stroke, maybe, all of these other things. But so this is why I say, like, it is so important for people at all levels to have access to as much education and resources as they can, because even if it seems like they're doing a small thing, that person's impact is huge because they have the ability to notice what's going on and advocate.
I love that. Absolutely love that. And that's a good thought for everybody. Again, because as we started this conversation, you go into 911 oh shit mode, we have to do something, to piecemeal the emergency of the day, the fire in front of me, here's what I have to do. And it's not easy by any stretch, but a little bit of taking a beat and putting some forethought to it and knowing where to go and what to look for is critical. And again, I applaud what you and the folks at Luma Link are doing too, by just offering another resource for everybody. Caregiving, I look at is the great equalizer. And in advanced adulting, there's a lot of those. More than half of us are going to get divorced. We're going to have our own health issues. We're going to have an older loved one that we may have to care for, or someone in our lives. And that's regardless of your background, economics, education, everything. It's equal for everybody. And I love and applaud what you guys are doing.